If a president declares a national emergency, does that mean that they can just do whatever they want? Like an instant I am the law button? Because every time the headlines scream national emergency about the border, fentanyl, or immigration, half the internet acts like Congress just got fired. So let's make this simple. A national emergency declaration is not a magic wand, but it is a key ring, and it unlocks some very real powers. Today, I'll show you what it does and what it does not, and who can stop it. Welcome to Project Liberty, where we break down how our government actually works. This matters because national emergency is one of those phrases that sounds like the apocalypse, but legally it's more like switching your phone into low power mode and then suddenly changing the settings. In the next few minutes, we're going to cover three things: what a national emergency declaration actually is in law, what powers it can trigger with real examples, and the guardrails, Congress, courts, and the calendar. So let's start with the most important point. A national emergency declaration is not to create a new law by itself. The president is not writing a fresh law out of thin air. The president is activating laws that Congress already wrote. Think of Congress like the person who brought the whole emergency toolkit: flashlight, first aid kit, road flares. And the president is the person allowed to open that kit when things get spicy. But they can only use the tools that are already inside. That's the law that sets the process for declaring one. And it requires the president to say which powers they're using and to renew it yearly. And yes, the National Emergencies Act sounds boring because Congress names laws like they're labeling folders on a desktop. Okay, so what does this toolkit look like and what tools are actually in it? Well, there's a lot. There are dozens and dozens of emergency-related laws. Most people cite the range from around 100 to 150 legal authorities, depending on how you count. Different emergencies trigger different tools. So instead of a giant list, let's group these into a few big buckets. Bucket number one of the biggest practical impacts is money. Not infinite money, but the ability to move certain pots of money around depending on the statute. Think of your household budget. You can't invent new dollars, but you might shift money from vacation to car repair when your engine explodes. Presidents have used the emergency powers to redirect certain defense-related funds, especially when Congress didn't give them exactly what they wanted in the normal budget process. Now, this is where people get heated, because Congress is supposed to control the spending. That's literally one of the biggest flexes in the Constitution. So the fight becomes, did Congress already authorize this kind of shifting in emergency law? Or is the president trying to do an end run around Congress? And when that fight happens, it often ends up in court. If this were a group project, Congress is the person who controls the Google Doc. The president is the person making the suggested edits at 2 a.m. And the courts are the exhausted friends saying, okay, which edits are actually allowed? Another huge bucket is sanctions. That is when the U.S. restricts money, trade, or business with certain foreign people or countries. The best known tool here is a law called IEPA. That stands for the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. In normal English, that's the president's economic lockdown toolbox in an international crisis. This is how the president freezes assets, blocks transactions, tells banks, do not process that. This is why a national emergency can matter even if you personally don't feel the emergency, because markets feel it, companies feel it, and global finance is basically a nervous squirrel. Some emergency authorities affect military construction, deployments, or readiness. The specifics depend on the law being invoked and what Congress already authorized. This is where you hear talk about the National Guard. That's the state-based military force that can be used for state emergencies and sometimes federalized, meaning brought under federal control. Now, I'm not saying every emergency declaration equals troops everywhere. It doesn't. But emergencies can change which levers can be pulled faster. And this is the key point. Declaring an emergency doesn't automatically tell the military, go do X. It mainly changes what the executive branch is allowed to do under the existing laws. Now to the one that always hits your notifications: immigration and border security. When people say the president could declare a national emergency at the border, they usually imagine one of two things: instant new immigration law or instant mass deportation with no process. That's not how it works. Immigration rules mostly come from statutes Congress passed, and courts still enforce due process rules and existing immigration law. But an emergency declaration can matter at the border in indirect ways, like enabling certain resource shifts or supporting certain restrictions if there's a lawful authority being invoked, or strengthening the government's argument that the situation is urgent. And presidents sometimes pair emergency declarations with some separate executive actions, like executive orders or agency policy changes. Important translation: the emergency headline may not be the whole move. It might be the shiny hood ornament on a larger legal engine. It's like when somebody posts, "We need to talk," and then that's the whole text. The emergency is not the conversation. It's the vibe that something big is coming. Now let's kill some myths pretty quickly. Myth number 1, a national emergency declaration does not suspend the Constitution. Rights do not just get evaporated because someone used a scary phrase. Myth number 2, it does not automatically bypass the courts. If the government takes actions that violate statute or constitution, people can sue. Myth number 3, it does not permanently rewrite policy. Most emergency declarations have to be renewed every single year, and Congress can change the underlying laws at any time. Now, can emergency powers still be abused? Yes, absolutely. But the abuse usually looks like stretching old legal language to cover a new goal, not like declaring emergency and becoming a king. So who can stop an emergency declaration from turning into a blank check? 3 big forces can do that: Congress, courts, and time. Congress can pass a law to end an emergency, or to block specific actions, or to cut off funding. Now here's the political reality. To pass a law, you need majorities in both chambers. And if the president vetoes it, you usually need a 2/3 to override that veto. So Congress can stop it, but Congress has to want to stop it and agree on how. Courts can stop specific actions under emergency authorities, not because emergency bad, but because the legal hook doesn't fit. The big questions court asks sound like this: did Congress actually authorize this specific action in this type of emergency? Did the agency follow required procedures? Did it violate constitutional rights? And do the plaintiffs have standing, meaning a real legal injury, not just anger on Twitter? Courts can also issue injunctions. That's a court order that pauses something while the case is being decided. Basically, the legal system saying, everybody freeze. Now, time is the underrated guardrail. Emergency declarations don't last forever automatically. They need renewal. Also, every emergency action creates paperwork, implementation, contracts, rules. Even with fast powers, government is still government. It moves like a group chat with 47 people and one guy who won't update the spreadsheet. So why should we care? Because national emergency headlines can move markets, change enforcement priorities, and shift federal resources. It can hit your job, your prices, your community faster than you think. If you're trying to understand what's really happening, here's the actionable move. When you see national emergency, don't stop at just the headline. Look for 2 things. What specific law is the president invoking, and what specific action the government is taking underneath it? Because declared an emergency is like saying, I opened the toolbox. Cool. Which tool did you grab? And what are you building? And if you want to be extra informed, watch what Congress does next and whether lawsuits are filed and by who. That's where the real limits show up. So what's the most confusing national emergency headline that you've seen lately? Drop it in the comments and tell me what topic it was tied to. If you want more videos that translate government into plain English, subscribe to Project Liberty. Because the next time you hear national emergency, you'll know to ask, okay, what powers does this actually trigger? Next week, we're staying in the same neighborhood. We're going into executive orders, what they can do, what they can't, and why they're not the same thing as law.